Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Giving Each Other the Finger, which is what's currently happening behind the scenes. Um, we're here tonight. We're here
Woo!
tonight to talk about a property that is near and dear to my heart, which is The Last of Us. Specifically talking about the series on HBO, which just wrapped up here just very recently. And yeah, before we get into that though, let's click over catch up with you guys. What have you been up to?
I've been up to just a few things. Actually, I've been playing some different games other than The Witcher 3, which I think I've mentioned on most of the episodes I've been on this podcast.
Which you think you mentioned, really? Struggling for these puns,
Witcher,
Joe.
Witcher, I think I've mentioned before.
Terrible.
Um, I started, I picked a game up again that I had started a long time ago, and then just recently restarted called Kentucky Route Zero, which I know I've mentioned in like the group chat I have with you guys. I don't think I mentioned on the podcast before, but it's this just really bizarre like point. Technically, it's a point and click adventure game, but there's really hardly anything. It almost feels more like a visual novel. Like technically you kind of like click to move the character around and stuff, but the experience of the game is really just reading dialogue and kind of interacting with different characters. There's not really any action or anything, but it's just this strange, surreal game that I feel like is eventually going to give me an existential crisis. Like the
Interesting.
the setup of the game is that you play a character named Conway and you're a delivery driver for an antique store.
Are you Kelly Conway?
Yes.
Kelly Ann Conway, maybe?
But you're setting out to try to make your final delivery, and the address you're trying to get to is off of Route Zero, which is this mysterious highway in Kentucky that seems to have some sort of metaphysical thing going on. And I don't exactly know what's happening. I'm only about halfway through right now, but it's if anyone out there is into like, David Lynch or just kind of weird games in general, I highly recommend it. Other thing I've been playing recently is a game that I played before a couple times, and a couple of our friends mentioned it on the recent Best Nintendo 64 game episode, even though it's not a Nintendo 64 game, but it is Fallout New Vegas. Um, and I've always enjoyed the Fallout games. I know this one's not Bethesda, but like the Bethesda games in general are kind of my favorite games of all time. This one is made by Obsidian, but it's kind of a spin-off of Fallout 3. But I feel like weirdly, this game has just kind of been appearing, like getting mentioned around me over the past month or so. Like I've had a couple other friends mention it, and I was like, huh, maybe I should pick that up and give it a try. And I think I've probably put like 10 hours into it over the past 2 or 3 days. It just kind of gets its hooks in you. Um, so that's been a lot of fun. I'm kind of trying to like see and explore some things I hadn't done before in that. I think that's it as far as games. As far as movies go, my wife and I have started our annual rewatching of the John Wick films. We usually watch the three that have been out at least once a year, and now it's kind of brought on because the fourth one is coming out next weekend, and pretty much every review and reaction I've heard is that it's the best of the franchise, which I can't even imagine because I just love every single one of those movies. But if anyone likes action movies and has not seen the John Wick films, I can't recommend them highly enough. And that's about it for me.
Well, what have I been up to? Let's see. Last night, actually, we went to the theater over in Aurora, Illinois here, and we went to go see Into the Woods, which I knew nothing about going into it really, other than I Googled the day before just what it was about. It's basically a bunch of twisted fairy tales thrown together in some mega meta plot. But it was enjoyable. There was was a musical, so there was a lot of singing involved and things of that nature, but there was some comedy. There was a few touching moments, and it was the first time I had been to that particular theater. I thought we were going to Chicago until Friday, so it was fantastic to find out that it was actually much closer to my house. So that was nice. But yeah, that was really fun. So did that with some friends, and then beyond that, let's see, we are counting down the days to a couple events we have coming up still. So we have Comic-Con, or C2E2 technically, in Chicago coming up in a couple weekends here. Excited to go to that because I haven't been to one of those before. And I think I already mentioned both my kids are getting some photographs at that event. My son with the voice actress, very Bart Simpson-y here, but who does the voice for Naruto. And then my daughter is getting her picture taken with Storm from the 90s X-Men cartoon. So they're both excited for those. And then the weekend after that, we're going to Indianapolis. This is kind of more finalized now with a hotel room booked and some other things. So I'm going to take the kids and we're going to go there to Squared Circle Expo 3 to well, it's gonna be a whole weekend. Well, it's a whole weekend. So Friday night, we're gonna get there and go to the Mario Brothers movie. Start the weekend, and then we are going to the Kokomo Toy Store, which is just a huge toy store that they have there. And then Saturday, we'll wake up and drive the rest of the way. About it's probably like a half hour, 45 minutes, I would say, to Indianapolis proper. And then we're gonna go to this wrestling convention that we're going to. So they do have wrestling both Friday and Saturday night, but we're actually not going to go for the wrestling. It's a giant convention essentially for all things wrestling. So they have vendors and they have maybe, I don't know what they're up to now, like 70 guests from like the 80s all the way through today that you can get pictures with or autographs with or whatever. So we were waiting to see one of my kids' favorite wrestlers is MJF, who's in AEW right now, is just this huge jerk. And I've heard even at his photo ops, he like purposely looks down at the table and like plays on his cell phone for the photo and like maybe flicks you off in the background because he's just stays in character like all the time, I guess.
Nice.
So we're going to see him. We got a photo with him booked, and then it's just beyond that, maybe whoever else we want to see. But it's kind of cool. They got a lot of the ECW guys there, and then, like I said, some old school WCW and WWE and WWF guys, and then they have some more modern people as well from AEW and some of the indies and things like that. So looking forward to that. And then we'll leave before, like I said, the show Saturday night and actually come back home because Easter will be the next morning. So we'll be back home for that. So looking forward to both of those events coming up here shortly, as well as some time in Michigan coming up for spring break. So we'll be there 4 full days, 6 days total, I guess, with driving. And that'll all be fun. And yeah, that's pretty much what we've been up to here. Absolutely nothing else going on in my house.
That's what I've heard.
Other than a new cat we got.
You got to be kidding me.
Oh, he was so shy last night. And today he's kind of coming out and playing a little bit more. So, and my grouchy cat is actually the one that's become his best friend to start with. So, two kittens in a row, which is really weird, but he's a jerk apparently, except to new kittens. Who knew?
Nice. All right. I've been continuing to play through Hogwarts Legacy. I've got I think 24 hours total time into it right now, and I'm not sure. I'm probably not even halfway through the game, but I've been doing tons of side quest stuff. I've just been exploring things, but that's all I've been really doing is for games lately. First thing we've been watching, we've been watching Mandalorian season 3. We've caught up on that. That's been pretty enjoyable so far. And we started watching season 2 of a show called Shadow and Bone, which is on Netflix. And we watched the first season of that, and it was pretty good. And so far the season has been pretty good. It's it's really really high fantasy thing that there's a lot of these shows that I watch, and I'm not sure how to rate them because they all feel very similar in quality and content, and they're enjoyable, but they're not I'm not sitting watching going wow, this is the best thing I've ever seen. But,
yeah,
I don't know. There's so many of those that seem similar. It just
That one's very
It's an odd
like
thing.
MTV or like CW type feel to it almost. It could be on those networks. We
Could see
watched,
that.
I think we
Yeah.
watched like the first 4 or 5 of season 1 on that, and then we lost out of it. But um, yeah, that's funny because that one's called Shadow and Bone. We're still watching through Lock and Key right now. I
Mhm.
think we're deep in season 1, and then they have that new one called like Lockwood and Company too. And I'm just like, these are all,
Yeah.
I don't even know how to.
That I haven't checked that one out, but
Yeah,
it kind of just the visuals of it seem like kind of similar, just in like this weird kind of spooky, kind of mysterious thing that's going on, and yeah.
you mentioned Mandalorian there. Did you catch that part in the first episode? It's like 20 minutes in when that was already better than Andor, the whole series.
No, but I did watch the third episode where I was like, whose show is this?
You're not wrong on that part.
I was like, how
Most
long is this
most
storyline
recent
going?
episode. Yeah, I know it was the longest episode they've ever had, and it was like, what the hell is going on right now?
It was so weird.
How do you feel like I haven't watched season 3 yet? Do you feel like it is of a consistent quality of the like along with the first 2 seasons of Mando, or
Yeah,
I
do.
really liked the first 2, and then this last one, I
Yeah.
was like, what is happening right now?
Yeah,
Episode 3 turns into Andor, so I was like, I don't know about this.
I mean that sounds amazing.
Yeah. They go back to an old character that you're surprised pops back up again, and he gets 40 minutes of the show, and you're like, wait, what?
It took me a while to figure out who even the character was because I didn't remember off the top of my head. I was like, wait, we've seen this guy, but what the heck did he do?
Yeah.
I'm so curious now. It wasn't Carl Weathers.
No.
Mando.
Mando. Ain't gonna be a rematch, Mando.
That's what I've been up to. So I guess let's jump into it here. Yeah, as I said, we are going to be talking about the Last of Us show from HBO, and I guess before we get into that, quick proper here, let's talk about our experiences with the game. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. We'll start with Cody because I assume that you have not played through it unless you played with Dave.
I thought this was on Resident Evil 4 tonight, so I apologize. I don't even know what I'm doing here. No, I've never played the game. I don't know anything about the game other than like zombie.
Well, now you do.
Fair. Yeah, I guess, but now I don't know watching, which I thought was fun. Like I didn't know as I was watching this show, like what was the same, what was different than what would happen in the game. So
Yeah.
I've never played the game. I really know very little about the game other than there was like a guy and a younger kid, and that's really it. But like I said, it was really fun to watch some of these episodes because as things would happen in some of them, I was like, I could see this part being a video game stage, and like this part, how would they do that in a video game? And so it was really interesting to watch it that way. But
okay, yeah, I mean that's what I assumed, and I kind of envy that you're able to watch it objectively because that's one of the things that we'll talk about it more as we get into it, but like separating myself from my knowledge of the game I felt was really difficult, and I'll be really curious to hear what your thoughts were of it, but you, Joe, I know you've played through it.
Yeah, I played the first one. I actually never played The Last of Us Part 2, but that doesn't matter right now because the events of the series only cover the first game.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I played the first game probably not long after it came out and started getting all the critical acclaim, and it was heralded as like one of the best games ever made, and I really enjoyed it. I've thought about getting, like, now that I have a PS5, I've thought about getting the remastered version, but like after watching the show, I'm like, I know that there's a lot more gameplay involved and whatnot, but like the story's pretty much the same. So I don't know if I'm going to spend the money to get that, but maybe if they eventually release it as like a PlayStation Plus game for free, I'll just download it then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I really love the game. The ending is something that, specifically has stuck with me ever since I first played it. And I'm sure we'll get into that eventually in this podcast.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was nervous, when they announced they're making this series because there have not really been very many decent video game adaptations in either film or television. And this being like A, such a beloved game, and B, such a just kind of darker, more serious, more mature game than a lot of things that they've tried to adapt before. I wasn't sure how seriously they're actually going to take it, but we'll get into that in a little bit here.
Yeah, for me, I don't remember precisely when I bought it. I think it was pretty early after release. And I've probably played through it, I think 3 or 4 times in total. I did buy when they re-released it on PS4, I bought that one, played through it again. I have played through part 2, which is certainly much more of a mixed reception on that one. Personally, I really enjoyed it. It was, without giving any spoilers away, it is very emotionally heavy throughout the entire game, which I think was the biggest for turn off, just in general for audiences, I think, because it's like it doesn't give you like moments of like levity really, or like it's just like,
yeah. I will say that I have read the plot of the second game, so I know what happens. That I mean, again, not spoiling anything, but it's kind of funny that like coming from the first game, which I mean, Cody, for you, the series is pretty faithful to the first game in terms of both like story and tone.
Okay.
But like one of the controversies for the sequel is basically that it's too bleak. And like saying that coming after this first one, it's like, okay, maybe I'm not in a hurry to jump into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. But yeah, this is the first game is one that I probably, I mean, I don't have a list, in my head exactly, but it's real close to top 5 games all time for me, if not in the top 5. And just love the stories and the characters. And yeah, when I heard that they were making a show, I was really excited. And like you, Joe, I was a bit nervous because there have not been a lot of real successful quality adaptations for games, like in movies or TV. So, but yeah, getting that as we go in a minute here. So just real quick on the game, it was or remains as a 95% on Metacritic with ratings from the critics. It received Game of the Year awards in 2013 from the DICE Awards, New York Game Awards, SXXW Gaming Awards, British Academy Video Games Awards, Game Developers Choice Awards, and then received many other awards in for like storytelling, voice acting, sound design, storyboard, things like that. So, and it has, now this number I think is for both part 1 and part 2 and like all platforms, but I have here 37 million copies sold for the franchise. So it's a pretty big number there. I guess let's start off now getting into some of the casting, I guess. And so I thought rather than going through and talking about like the plot, like straight through, which is something we typically do, let's just kind of talk about like characters and like their arcs or their evolutions, which is one of the big things with these characters here. And so I guess let's start maybe just talking briefly about the casting of Pedro Pascal. How do you feel about that?
He's daddy. I was curious when I saw that he was cast. I mean, I've seen him in a number of things, like, prior to this, and I've always enjoyed him as an actor, but for some reason, I just, at least when they announced it, I kind of had a hard time picturing him as Joel. When they finally started releasing like images and then the trailer, I was like, okay, I can see it now. But yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed him, and like, I do think that casting an actor sort of his caliber was one of the early indicators to me that they were taking this seriously and were actually, trying to make it as good as they possibly could.
Yeah, I agree. When I heard the name first, I was like, okay, that could work. And when I saw pictures, I was like, oh, that looks like Joel. And I was like, okay, now if he can, if he can pull off, that persona, we've got a real good thing going here. What about you, Cody?
Yeah, again, not being familiar with the character, like just seeing him as the lead in this is, I mean, it's a smidge distracting, honestly, just because he's so famous for another serialized role that in The Mandalorian that he's already in. So, I don't know that.
I mean, he's not wearing a helmet in this, so.
Well, he doesn't all the time in The Mandalorian either, and sometimes he has to have a season 3 plot line to clean that up. Joe, you should check it out. But anyway, having like somebody be the lead in two, which are presumably fairly successful series running at the same time, is kind of I don't know that it's unheard of. I'm sure there must be other examples of it. I can't think of any at the top of my head here, but just the idea that he's the lead in both of those, and so therefore his like acting personality is going to kind of guide those shows. Like I know this is based on source material, and The Mandalorian is not per se an old property, but it's kind of based on the code that character is following in that show. So I was intrigued where this was going to go. He wasn't exactly who I pictured being the lead in the show, and I full confession to our listeners out there, like I was not supposed to be hosting on this one tonight, and then they told me to do the free trial of HBO Max on Amazon, and that's what I ended up doing and binged it in 4 days really here, but
that was pretty impressive.
Honestly, when he showed up in the first episode, I was like, oh yeah, he's in this. Like kind of had forgotten that because it wasn't a show I really ever paid attention to, But yeah, it worked for the most part. Like I don't know, he tries to in this show, and again, I don't know the source material, but he has a way to like make his character seem like he's distant and like withdrawn in his thoughts in different ways in the episodes in this show, and I had a harder time believing it because it was him, but that's probably just because I know him so well from that other series. So I mean, did he do a good job? Yeah, I thought he did a good job with this, but it's just kind of weird to see another role for this one
because actor. The Mandalorian is so open and forthcoming with his thoughts and feelings.
Yes. To a fault, I would argue, especially within the actual Mandalorians themselves. But
oh man,
that part is true. Yeah, he's just like, maybe you should just keep your mouth shut once in a while.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Bella Ramsey here now. So, for me, real quick, when I heard that she was cast, I was definitely had less confidence in her than I did with Pedro Pascal, and part of that, I mean, a lot of that was because like we've seen her in Game of Thrones, but that's basically it. Because I didn't know exactly how she would be able to handle this. I also I was thinking, okay, well, I mean, she resembles the character, but I wasn't sure that
does she.
Not a lot, maybe yes, but in some ways. But I that's where I was like thinking, I don't know if she's going to feel like Ellie to me, when we started. And I will say that definitely as the series went along, I was more and more impressed with what she was able to do in bringing that character to life. I thought she actually did a great job, probably even better than Pedro Pascal, I would say.
How dare you? No, I mean, I agree. And actually, I was excited when they announced her because I thought she was fantastic on Game of Thrones. Like, she was one of my favorite characters on that show. And she was like 10, I think, when she started on it. Like playing true, yeah. Lyanna Mormont, the Lady of Bear Island. Like, she was just, I mean, normally child actors are terrible. And like, I just thought she was fantastic on that. So, I mean, I was excited when they announced that she was playing Ellie. I was also curious because she was so young on Game of Thrones. I was curious to see, several years later now, has she grown as an actress? I don't really, I think on my last episode, I actually mentioned a movie that I watched that she was in, but I haven't seen her in anything else. When you said she looks like the character and I said, does she? I was joking because there was some controversy around her casting by just like douchebag idiots on the internet,
Right.
basically
What?
saying that she
That doesn't
wasn't
happen.
like, people were saying that she wasn't like cute or attractive enough to play Ellie, who is a
Of
14-year-old
course.
child.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
people are just fucking monsters. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think she's fantastic on The Last of Us as Ellie. And I also agree that over the course of the season, I feel like she just kind of gets better and brings more depth to the character.
Mhm.
What did you think,
Yeah.
Cody?
So in the video game, the character is older than the TV show it presents them here. Is that what we're saying?
No, she's
No.
14 in the game.
She's 14 in the
And
game.
in the TV show, she's
14 also.
14.
so she's the exact same age as the dead daughter. I thought she was.
Yes,
I
that
thought she
that
was
as
younger
well.
than the
Yes,
daughter.
she
Okay.
is the same age as
Okay.
Sarah. Yep.
All right. Well, yeah. I didn't know if they were the same age. No, I thought she did a really good job. Also, she's a little freaking psycho, man. But
Yeah.
you'll have to tell me as we go through how accurate that is. No, I thought she did a great job though as well, and it was kind of fun to see her, like you all mentioned, pop back up from Game of Thrones.
Mm. Yeah, I was just looking here. So she is in real life is 19, which I didn't. I mean, that makes sense because Game of Thrones. That was quite a while ago already. But yeah, I mean, she fits. Like she doesn't look like she's 19, which helps
No.
tremendously. So, all right. I mean, otherwise in the cast here, I mean, we don't need to go through these, but we had Anna Torv as Tess. We didn't have her for very long, but she did a pretty good job, I think, at that time.
More
Nick
of a
Offerman,
fringe character, really.
was she on Fringe?
She was one of the leads in Fringe.
Nice. Nick Offerman, Murray Bartlett, which we'll probably get to that here in a bit. And Gabriel Luna as Tommy, and Melanie Linsky as a brand new character. This character was not in the game, and I know there were some people who were like, "Why do we have so much people on these people that are not in the game?" But
Melanie Linsky as Sarah Palin.
Oh my. Yeah. Anyways, I guess let's so I guess let's talk about some of the differences for the game. Let's go ahead and get in that here before we start taking some of the major plot points. Now, just real quick without giving away my my overall thoughts too much, I would say that the way they did this is the proper way to do an adaptation of a video game, or really any material really at all, like books or anything. We see a lot of times where people try to make like creative changes because they're like, I don't know, if they want to like try to make the story like their own a bit, or like their version of it, or if they think they can do better. I don't know why people make creative changes to adaptations, but other than a couple we'll get to in just a minute here, but very few changes from the story of the game into the story on the show here. And so probably the biggest one I would say by far that's a difference from the game is they took out the possibility of getting infected by spores, which was a big thing in the game, where you would get in areas where there was like, it was heavy in spores in the air, and you had to like wear a gas mask to go through them. And like if you didn't, I mean, it's not like you had a choice, like you automatically put it on. There was like no danger of you as the character in the game getting infected that way because they automatically did it. But that's just a part of the lore that they took out. I think it would have been too difficult to, perhaps to have that in there. I'm not sure, but having it just a physical contact only in the show, it worked totally fine for me. I didn't have a problem with that. Because as I say, that like the infection by spores, while it certainly is a big part of the game, doesn't like change the story at all. It's just a method of a thing happening. So, and then let's see. So we had the story of Bill and Frank. So we talked about that briefly, which both are characters in the game, but more or less minor characters. We meet Bill. We actually do not meet Frank in the we do meet Frank in the game. He's simply not alive in the game.
Womp womp.
Um, and the
Oh,
story between those two is considerably different in that, I mean,
It, it is
we
it
don't
is
get,
not very beautiful.
yeah, we don't get a lot of backstory into it. We just know that they are characters that are together, or were, and actually, before before we meet Bill in the game, they have a falling out, a not pleasant falling out, and yeah, Frank ends up on the wrong end of a rope in that. But
ooh.
um, yeah, do we want to talk about Bill and Frank here quick before we go into other stuff? How did that episode 3, which really featured their backstory, was definitely really highly reviewed and thought of there. What do you guys think about that one?
Whoever this guy is that played Bill, boy, they should really cast him in another show. He really had some
Yeah,
chops.
he was pretty good, that guy.
I say that
What's
mildly not joking because I've never seen Nick Offerman in anything prior to this. So,
really?
not that I can think of.
Wow. I love Nick Offerman.
Well, he's an alpha male. I'm an alpha male. So we just, it didn't.
Yeah, just can't have two
I'm
of
not
those
going to
in the same
acknowledge
room.
that.
You don't think he is? Okay, that's fair.
I love that episode. It made me feel all the feelings. Like, for days after I watched it, I would just think back on it and get a little misty in my eyes. I do think Nick Offerman has largely kind of built a career out of playing versions of himself. He is like Ron Swanson is basically Nick Offerman if he was a libertarian, whereas like in real life, Nick Offerman is pretty liberal, but he is into like woodworking and whiskey and like, stereotypically kind of masculine things. And I like how in this show, Bill, especially at first, kind of comes off that way. It's like he's a hardcore survivalist. When the world kind of ends, he's excited about it because he gets to play, like, build all these things, and he basically builds this whole town for himself. But then we find out, oh wait, he is also a gay man who I think we can kind of assume, based on the way things play out, that he has maybe never come out prior to this. Like, it feels like his sexuality is something that has been like a secret and that he's never been kind of able to explore in his whole life. And maybe that's part of the reason that he's kind of like locked himself in a bunker underneath his house and shut himself away from the world. And then, this guy just wanders into his life literally and sees that in him and ends up like being able to bring it out. And in the span of an hour, it's just this incredibly beautiful love story between these two men. And we kind of see the life that they build together. And then ultimately that they end their lives together.
Well, we presume. No, I'm joking. All right. Anyway, no, this was a rare exception to me not watching the show from week to week or knowing anything about it. Was I had seen headlines pop up for episode 3, which was, it said Nick Offerman was in episode 3, and I didn't know anything about what the episode 3 was about. But I know a lot of people said had emotional reactions to that episode, and it was really highly rated, like I think you said, Brett. And so going into that one, I was kind of like, this isn't going to resonate as highly with me as it did for most people online, but it was pretty good. I gotta say, it was a very good episode. As a matter of fact, I was telling my mom about it when I was talking to her on the phone on Friday. It was really a sad and a beautiful episode, as Joe just said, and I hate to agree with Joe, but it was the story you could tell in like 45 minutes worth of time between two characters. I mean, if you had I don't know, maybe the video game adds or detracts from that experience. I don't know, but like, I don't think I've seen many one-off TV episodes of any show where you can just have two new characters come in and have that connection to them in such a short span of time. And then it's wrapped up and done by the end of that episode, like It was impressive. Is all I'll say on that. Was impressive.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys are saying. When the episode started and like you get to a point where you're like, oh, this is a lot of time with Bill and Frank. And I thought going into this episode, I figured, well, okay, we're just getting a little bit of backstory just to set up who they are. And the fact that, like 95% of the episode was them and not our main characters of the story. Like if you just told me that right from the start, I would have been like, well, that's a really odd choice. But I was pretty much locked into that episode the whole way through. Like I really enjoyed it. I did not, by the end, I was very happy that that's what they did and not just like a little blurb of a story and then into the main story with our regular characters, Joel and Ellie. So yeah, I thought it was great. I thought that it felt like really realistic as well. Like it's not just, oh, they meet and fall in love and this fairy tale thing. Like it definitely, they went through a lot to get in that. I mean, what was the total time on that? I
think it was 20 years.
Yeah, what would have been 20 years? Yeah, because that's the time flying on the frame of the show. Yeah, so 20 years. So yeah, it felt and it was very heartbreaking, obviously, and heartbreaking in a different way than what we got in the game. And I thought it was a great creative decision that changed from the game, but was very successful in what they did. So
yeah, I just add to that too. They could have, as the filmmakers or TV episode producers here, they could have chopped this whole episode or made it 10 minutes. But because really, you're right. Like it does interrupt the flow of this overall series considerably to like just devote 45 minutes randomly to these two characters who ultimately don't matter a lot to the plot of the TV show.
Don't provide much to them.
Right. Like
they matter to me, damn it.
Well, Joel and Ellie didn't need this story for them. They could have come up on the, compound and found whatever as well. But the fact that they took this for this long, just to kind of show that in this world, which is very apocalyptic, there's beauty out there. There's these other stories to be told. There's still hope for two people to have a good life and a good relationship and meet somebody. And you don't get that in the rest of this show. Like this was kind of the lighthouse, if you will, of humanity compared to the rest of the shit they meet of people that are scrapping for resources and fighting infected or whatever else.
Yeah. So I think that segues really well into this next thought I had, which is, this is a show that is very, at its core, you would think would be very similar to things like The Walking Dead or, gosh, what else? Other like apocalyptic zombie material.
I actually, not to interrupt, but I have a note here. When they released the first trailer for this series, I watched it with my wife, and she is not familiar with the game at all. And I'm like gripped by this trailer, like, oh my God, this looks like it could actually be good. And my wife goes, it's just another zombie show. I get it. Like, I know what it is. Like,
yeah, it very easily could have been that way because the game itself is very much that way. It's a lot of combat with these infected creatures, former humans, and it definitely could have been that way where it's like half of the show is just them fighting through because that's the game is. And the fact that there actually is very, very few moments where we actually see infected in the show, and that like 90% of the show is focused on interactions with humans.
Yeah.
I thought that was an awesome idea to separate itself from The Walking Dead in particular and other similar shows.
Yeah. And I would imagine that that's also related to why they did away with the spore idea. Because to me, it feels like they established that the world is dangerous. There is this fungal infection, whatever. But it feels like the creators of the show are very much interested in the human side of things. They're exploring like what is left of humanity, what is possibly worth fighting for, what is being lost, like all very human questions. And I mean, I think one of my concerns going into this was like, how are they going to balance the combat? Like you said, Brett, in the game, you're basically fighting like through the entire thing. And I think a lot of previous video game adaptations have kind of felt the need to make sequences feel video gamey and like force action in there that doesn't need to be there and like not worry about developing character at all. And it feels like this series is 100% about character. And I mean, really, that's why the game is so widely acclaimed, is because of the narrative and the characters. It's just that. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, just to jump in here, I think a lot of people feel like the mechanics of the game are the worst part of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's nothing really wrong with them, but they're not like outstanding or like
there's nothing like groundbreaking or unique. Like, gameplay wise, it feels like another kind of zombie shooter. So I think it was very smart, on the part of the showrunners to kind of push that stuff to the periphery. And like, I feel like there's just enough with the infected to remind us that they're there and that they're dangerous. But
this is jumping way ahead.
I didn't really miss it.
But has there been any talk on like the plan for this show going forward? Is it going to be like the 2 seasons based on the 2 games and that's it? Or is this like, if it's popular, it goes 10 seasons type thing?
I've heard comments from the showrunners that allude to the season 2 of the show being tied into the story of the second game, which I kind of assumed that they would kind of do an in-between thing, like they would tell stories between the games. But it sounds like maybe they're going to go to the second game.
I heard recently, like this past week, that they said that basically elements of the second game are going to be in season 2, but that it's not going to necessarily be contained to season 2.
Okay.
So it sounds like they're saying like, yes, they're adapting the second game, but that it could actually span more than just one season, which I mean, that might allow them to do what you're saying and kind of fill in the, space between there.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a lot of story they could tell between those two, because the jump from the first game to the second game, I don't remember exactly, but I think it's 4 years. Yeah, it's multiple years. So even just from the perspective of Bella Ramsey in season 2 is, I guess technically she is old enough to play that character because she's 19 now. But
that is a concern I have, because I feel like she's one of those actresses who is going to just eternally look like she's 14.
Right. Yeah.
And like from what I've seen of the second game, like Ellie definitely like ages and kind of like bulks up a little bit, and
yeah, she looks more like an adult.
Yeah. Sure. So like I'm curious to see. I mean, they have said that they are absolutely not going to recast Bella Ramsey for season 2, but I'm just kind of curious to see if they like, make her start pumping iron or something, or do something to like make a physical change in the character.
I mean, it's interesting too, because I definitely got a little bit of Walking vibe, having not played the game, but having watched the first, I don't know how many seasons of that, 8 or 9 or something before I quit. But that show, the early seasons were really focused on the humans versus the zombies, and then the later seasons were really humans versus humans, and the zombies were there. And this TV show really started with humans versus humans, and the zombies are there. So they could always flip the script on this, I guess. And, if I'm sure there's going to be reasons why they're going to be placed back into environments that have a lot of zombie danger, fetch quest to the TV show or whatever you want to say. There's going to be some reason they have to go to those areas. When I was watching this, I had the question about the spores, because as soon as they said it was fungus and then they didn't use spores, I was like, oh, that's an interesting choice. Like, I liked the method they had of the tendrils growing underground in the roots, and they being able to feel stuff far away from everything else. But I also was, it's interesting too to I guess The Walking Dead is this way a little bit, but as soon as they were like in the western part of the United States, and they were like, well, there's just no more fungus out here because we're out in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, I guess that's kind of how the zombies work in The Walking Dead, but they weren't smart enough to just go to Wyoming, I guess, on that show. So.
Right. That's like, let's keep going to the more heavily populated areas.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I just made like a short list here of times where we actually saw infected in the show, and I only have 6. I have the very start of the outbreak. Wow. With Granny, which was terrifying.
So creepy.
That was so well done. We have the clickers in the museum.
That was fun.
Which just real quick, that scene was amazingly done. That is straight out of the game. Like everything about it. Like the set design was absolutely perfect. Tess blowing up the horde. And then Joel and with a sniper rifle shooting a bunch of those in the
that had to be a video game part, right?
Touching out. Yes and no.
Okay.
We can come back to that. Henry kills Sam, who was technically infected at that point, and then Ellie and Riley killing Runner, and then I think that was the last time we actually saw an infected in the show. Was the Left Behind episode.
Wow.
Is that true? Like the last,
I think that might be true.
The last 3 or 4 episodes didn't have a single infected that I remember seeing.
Huh. Yeah, I think you might be right.
What about that zombie giraffe?
So that's that would have been a cool twist. But yeah.
Also, you mentioned Tess blowing up the group of zombies, but you didn't mention the tendril kisses.
Yeah. So let's get to some big moments from the show. Then let's go right into that. So. Yeah, there definitely were a lot of, as I said, a lot of moments that were just kind of straight ripped out of the game. Yeah, sure. Like, let's go ahead and do that right away. So that part wasn't, though. The part of and Tess actually dies in the game. Just real quick, Tess dies fighting off a bunch of Fedra soldiers, but kind of the same. I mean, she dies fighting off a horde of things essentially. But yeah, that that scene with that kiss was the first time where I in the show was like I verbally was like, oh my God, what is this? This is like, it like threw me off a bit.
It was like the most horrific thing in the entire series to me.
Yeah, that was terrifying. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm watching right now. But so one of the things I kept up with was the official HBO podcast after the show, and they talk about that quite a bit, and the way they describe it was, it really makes sense a lot. It's pretty cool. If you get a chance, go back and listen to that. It makes sense. But yeah, that moment was really like, it definitely, I guess for one, it kind of said, okay, they're willing to do things differently, and for a little bit of shock value, and that was definitely shocking there. So I guess okay, so back up now to probably the first big moment of the show, which is Sarah dying, getting shot by the soldier, because they have a standing order that basically no one is getting out, whether they know they're infected or not. Because I mean, at that point, they don't have a way of knowing like who's infected, so it's just kind of like contain. But I guess I would just go first. Is that scene again was pulled basically straight out of the game. Pretty much every moment of it was shot for shot the same, and really well done. I felt the same way watching that as I did playing the game, and it's just as heartbreaking both still every time. So yeah, how'd you guys feel about that?
I agree. Man, like I think that scene like is what really sold me on, Pedro Pascal as Joel. Like just his like fear when he realizes kind of what's happening, and then just the loss of his daughter, and it's just heartbreaking. And I mean, I think that's what this show does amazingly well, is making you feel the grief and loss that these people are suffering, and kind of just what the world loses when like stuff goes wrong like this. But yeah, I just thought it was like just horrific. What do you think, Cody?
I have no thoughts on that part.
Cody likes seeing girls get shot.
It's just another day in life.
Plot device.
Kids die all the time.
It's a plot device.
Kids die all the time, Henry.
I mean, it sets up his arc, which is kind of, it takes him so many episodes to kind of open up about her and realize maybe where he's at in his life. And it was, I mean, it's a little down the road here, but it's kind of interesting to see him actually open up before she does. Ellie, not Deadzo, the other one here. Stepdaughter. Pseudo daughter.
Yeah, it definitely, it sets up his character, obviously, as the, for probably like the rest, like 80% of the rest of the show, sets up what he is. So other moments I had here that I had on my list. So we talked about the clickers in the museum a bit. We talked about Bill and Frank, and so I guess the next big theory that I have is another moment that where I verbally was like, "Oh my god!" was when the swarm of infected like belched up out of the ground in the Kansas City in that cul-de-sac scene, and that was really like obviously because of the show has so few moments with the infected. Like I felt like terrified watching that. I was like, that is not something I want to mess with.
Yeah, I felt that too. I mean, I was waiting for something to happen, especially after the like second in command dude with that group. Like he shows what's her face that kind of sinkhole or whatever.
The ground's like moving.
Yeah, we know there's something going on under the ground there, and like she just can't be bothered to investigate it because she's so intent on murdering this child. And so like that's kind of like hanging over the situation. Like they set that up, something's gonna happen. I did not expect that to be the something. Like, I assume there's some sort of infected underground, but I didn't think it was going to be like this massive swarm just bursting out.
Yeah, nuts. So I guess we can circle back around to your question, Cody, about the cul-de-sac scene with the sniper.
Yeah.
The first part of that is pretty similar in that you have a sniper like taking aim at you, and you have to like sneak your way up to get to him. The difference being that in the game you have like half a dozen other like enemies like in between you and the sniper you have to like get through to get to him. And then basically the same when once you get up there and take the sniper out, then you with a sniper rifle have to like protect Ellie and Sam and Henry and shoot some infected. And there's a swarm of infected, but not to that degree.
Okay.
It's like maybe like a dozen or something like that.
Probably can't handle the characters on that system. No big deal.
I mean, honestly, the worst part of that whole scene to me was the girl infected who was like a contortionist.
God, yeah, that was going over the seats.
So creepy.
So creepy. It was just fun. Like fun karma with Kathleen getting eaten by a child because she's so hell-bent on killing a child herself. But
am I the go ahead, Cody.
Well, I was just gonna say, back to the scene with the museum though, like, one of the TV and movie property wise, if you set yourself in a grounded reality and I know we're talking about zombies, so it's not really that grounded, but like when you watch, The Walking Dead, for example, there were zombies everywhere. but like there was nothing to really explain why there would be different types of zombies everywhere. And I'm guessing this must be somewhat related, faithful to the video game as well. But like you play Resident Evil, like it's these crazy ass science and blah blah blah, and then there's all these different types of zombies that you encounter. And then in this show, like at the museum scene, when they had the eyeless ones that operated on sound, I was like, "Oh, this is cool," because this is like very different. And then when they had the scene we're talking about here, when they had the like super pudge that jumped out of the hole and was like fucking shit up, I was like, whoa, like obviously there's not a human that is that shape, but because this is now explained through like plant biology and stuff, like it's within the realm of the world that they could have different types of zombies that are evolved, and that was kind of a cool concept to like actually have that explained, I thought. So
yeah, that definitely is something that I could say, could be considered a negative on the show, is that they don't really explain the different variants of the infected at all. They just like, here's one and here's a different one, and they actually don't even bother to explain the really the clickers are the ones that really
I was going to say the clickers are the only ones they do explain.
They kind of explain the runners are fast and whatever, but
there's that scene in like the first or second episode where Ellie's kind of like asking about the ones whose heads are split open and they hear like bats, like the clickers, and then I think she says something alluding to the boomers there too, or the bloaters. I mean,
bloaters. Yeah, she does mention that. Yeah,
okay. But yeah, which actually that's another change from the game, because in the game, don't the bloaters like throw spores at you or explode into spores or something?
If you get too close, they explode for whatever reason. They just like go boom. Yeah. Which they. Just so just that cul-de-sac scene just was really like action heavy at the end. There was like just a lot. So you had like the horde. You had a bloater, which they didn't really explain, other than it just was this tank that like an unstoppable force. And then that child zombie was nuts. But yeah, so apparently they another thing they had on the HBO podcast, but apparently he wanted to make the bloater rip Perry in half, like at the waist. And the CGI team couldn't figure out how to do that realistically.
Oh wow!
I mean, ripping his head off was effective enough. I thought
that was killed him just as well. But that scene was just all around was pretty amazing at the end. So let's see a few more points off the show here. So the next thing I have on the list, it was the whole episode with Ellie kind of going on her own because Joel was stabbed and dying, and the whole thing with David, which is most of that episode was straight pulled out of the game as well, and the the moment at the end of that episode where she like makes mincemeat out of David, mostly like the game, but I mean she goes off in that scene, like holy cow.
I mean, rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, it was justified. I did kind of feel at one point like I guess they, I mean, it's really hard for me to say like, oh gosh, she didn't have enough trauma to be acting that way. Well, that's a pretty asinine thing of me to say, but that was one thought I had, was that he was he definitely was giving off the creep vibes, and like at the end there was basically trying to molest her or whatever, but like the total amount of trauma that she had there, I'm not sure that acting that way fit. I don't know.
I mean, you don't think she was traumatized enough to just like make Swiss cheese out of him? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, that's where she really like goes off. That's for sure. Like we had seen her be violent and capable of things prior to that, but like when Joel was down for the count for whatever that was, episode and a half, or however long he was down for, like, and she had to do stuff on her own, like, damn, she really stepped it up.
Well, yeah. I mean, going like starting with Joel being out of commission, he's been her protector. He's like he's the thing in this world that she cares about at this point. And so she's like worried about trying to keep him alive. And then she gets taken prisoner and learns that her captors are cannibals.
Because she doesn't watch her back. Classic rookie move.
Well, but I'm saying like there's like Joel's all kinds of messed up. She gets held prisoner by cannibals. The dude, like, even while she's in the jail cell, he like touches her hand in a way that's kind of like fucking creepy.
Mm.
Like, so she seems to pick up on that. Then they try to kill her. Then, like, I mean, it's one thing after another. So, like, by the time it got to the point where she does kind of snap and just stab the shit out of him, I felt like it was totally justified. I mean, I think in that moment, like, she's not thinking rationally. That is just like adrenaline and trauma and
Pure
fear,
emotion. Yeah.
just like all coming to the surface, and rage, and like, is when it's over, like when she stumbles out of the building, like she's clearly in shock and traumatized. It was not really like a conscious thing for her at all, but I totally believed it. I mean, I think it's interesting too, Cody, you said early on in this episode that she was a psychopath.
Yeah.
And it does feel like up to this episode, and like maybe even into this episode, it feels like she has this kind of almost creepy fascination with violence.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like there's the moment where she finds that infected in the like secret underground compartment in that gas station they stop at.
Yeah.
Where, and she just kind of like slowly stabs it in the head, and like she has this kind of look of like satisfaction on her face, I think.
Yeah, it's like a science experiment.
Yeah, and she's like, she wants a gun. She keeps asking Joel to give her a gun, and then when he does, she's like so excited about it. Mm. And it seems like she does have this like fascination and fixation on violence. But then after this happens to her in this episode, like after she experiences like real violence, I feel like maybe she realizes that that's not something that she, really wants any part of. I mean, because obviously she's traumatized after this, and then like going into the finale, she's barely talking to Joel. Like it seems like she's suffering PTSD from like all the stuff that she's experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think it's interesting just to see that change in that character as a result of what she's gone through in the penultimate episode.
I agree with all that. Minus you mentioned that they were cannibals. He clearly says it's venison in the episode, Joe. So I don't know what to tell you.
The deer had a weird ear.
Sure did.
I mean, just circling back around, like, I mean, I obviously have a different point of view as a 40-plus-year-old man, but that was just one thought I had. I was like, wow, she's really going off on this guy. Like, but I'm not saying that like it wasn't deserved. But.
Yeah, maybe I'm a psychopath. Well, because like another conversation I've heard around this episode, like I've listened to not the official podcast, but a couple other podcasts with like critics discussing the show. And one thing multiple people brought up was Joel killing all the dudes who like come to try to kill him in the basement in this episode. He tortures that one guy. Mm. Like he's got the two guys kind of captive, and he's like torturing the one guy and then ends up killing them both. And I've heard a couple people be like, oh, he kills them in cold blood. Like they were literally sent there to kill him.
Yeah, it wasn't like they were just like standing around the yard.
Yeah, like it's if someone is trying to kill you, you don't have listen. To quote one of the greatest movies of all time, Roadhouse, when someone's got a gun pointed at you, you have two choices. You die or you kill the motherfucker. Like, I mean, it's sometimes you don't have a choice. I mean, in that moment, Ellie didn't have a choice. Like, she had to fucking kill that guy.
Yeah.
To quote the Jesus, you take a gun away, you stick it up their ass, and you pull a trigger till it goes click.
Oh, that's good stuff. All right, so let's see. Another more big moments from the show here. We got so I guess we'll jump ahead to now to the scene where Joel saves Ellie from the surgery room.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So now that is one of the interesting, like in the moment when I was watching it with my wife, I said to her, like, I'm not certain about this music choice because it was just a very sad, somber, score choice that they put over top of that, and a lot of that was shot in a way that was not necessarily actiony. It was, and well, okay, so to quote what my wife her thought about it was that it was Joel not wanting to kill these people. Like he does not want to be in this position. Doing this is like tearing him apart inside, but he has to do it. Like this is what needs to happen because he has to get to Ellie. And in that line of thinking, and I think that's what the showers were going for as well, is that it was, this is not Rambo saving the day. It's a very terrible thing on all sides, and that was the sad music choice. And from that, when she said that, I was like, yeah, okay, I get it now.
I didn't really take it that way so much as, to me, it just felt more matter of fact. Like, I mean, I agree with you that it wasn't like him saving the day, but I feel like from his perspective, not that he was like thrilled to do it, but it was like he has to save Ellie. Like that's all he cares about in that moment. Like he's just taking all these people out because he knows that that's the only way he can stop them from killing Ellie. And I mean, I liked the way it was shot because it definitely didn't feel like it was trying to glorify the violence. And I think it was shot in a way that it's supposed to make us think like this guy that we've cared about this entire season is doing something monstrous. Like this is a moment where he is just kind of like straight up killing a lot of these people.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed to carry on from the 8th episode where he just mentioned like he tortures those guys, he kills the guys. Like it just seemed to me as a viewer like he was out of fucks to give about the situation at that moment. And so he is, because we had seen in earlier episodes, like there were moments they had interacted with other people on the trail where, there was that moment's hesitation or there was that moment of negotiation or bargaining or you go this way, I'll go my way. And at this point, he's just like, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead. And then he goes to the hospital and he's like, you're dead, 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 till he gets Ellie back, essentially.
Yeah, I feel like I think I agree with, I think this is what you're saying. Like it felt like he's kind of on autopilot.
Yes, that's a good way to
he's
put
not
it.
really feeling anything.
Right.
Because like all he's thinking about is Ellie.
These people need to die, and I'm apparently the one shot wonder. Don't play GoldenEye with me. There we go.
See, if he had gone slappers only, this scene would have played out very differently.
Okay, so before we get to the last big thing on the plot that I want to talk about, because now is a good point. I think we could circle back around. And so the question I have for you guys is, do you feel that the show did a good job conveying the bond between Joel and Ellie up to this point? Because, as we, the scene that we just talked about where he is on do anything he needs to do to save Ellie, that he has to have her back. How do you feel that the show got to that point?
Cody, you go first on this one.
Well, I think I thought their relationship seemed fairly organic, if a bit stereotypical, from like a rowdy kid who swears a lot and doesn't really like to listen to this new adult figure that they're thrust into a relationship with, because that's essentially what happens here. He doesn't trust her. He just views her as like the means to an end as far as his original mission he's starting with, and it's an excuse to go out west, and he's kind of looking for his brother as this show goes on. His brother's apparently Ghost Rider. We didn't even mention that, but he's consumed by the all-consuming fires of hell. Would have been a helpful skill to bust out at any point here, Diego Luna, but that's fine. And then, he kind of slowly opens up to her. He kind of came around to her as the episodes went on, and she, I think, really took to him right away, because there were some moments where maybe somebody else would have left her behind or decided this isn't worth my effort. And he never did that. He was very singularly focused with what he thought needed to be done. And then, especially as he started to open up more about his own daughter, then I think she probably viewed him slightly differently as well, because like just knowing somebody was a parent versus hearing stories about them talking about their kid who was a daughter and very similar to you, and ways you're similar, ways you're different. That was at the end, I know, but I think they did slowly start to open up to each other as this went on. And then it probably the part that changes a lot in here, which we mentioned the autopilot stuff and like when he wakes back up, but it probably has to do with that fact that he told her to leave and she thought about it, and then she comes back. And like, I joke about her not checking behind her with the guy with the gun, but like she ended up getting what she needed. She got the penicillin out of the situation. She saved him. She stitched him back together. And then, when he woke up, we don't get this in the show, but when he woke up, there has to be that part on his part that is like, this kid saved my life, and this kid did what needed to be done for me to be the one to be here today. I should have died, and she put herself at risk and harm and all these other things to get to that point. So I thought the relationship was actually really good between these two. Just episode to episode was really, like I said, kind of built a little bit here and there. I thought they did a really nice slow onion peel of how it was going to play out between the two, and like them kind of in their own way opening up to each other. Because like I said, she didn't really relay her part of the story till towards the end of this show either, with her friend and when she killed somebody and how she got bit and all this other stuff also. So I thought it was good. I mean, honestly, it seemed believable to me.
I agree. I agree that what is here is great. I definitely feel the bond between the two of them. I think it helps that like if you see any interviews with like the two actors together, it feels like they really have a bond in real life, like they really care about each other. Part of me does kind of feel like I wish there had been one more episode. And I feel like I would have wanted that maybe after they leave Tommy's like safe haven in Wyoming and before Joel gets injured, because it's like after that is when they first really start bonding. We have that montage where like Joel's finally teaching her how to shoot, and like they're actually having fun together. And like part of me thinks maybe I would have liked a little bit more of that, and like really seeing the growth of the relationship after that. Or maybe it's after the cannibal thing, when they're kind of traveling to their final destination there. I mean, that might have been a little trickier just because Ellie is, obviously struggling with PTSD there. But I feel like I just would have liked a bit more, like one more episode that really just solidified the fact that, they are family now. Like Joel sees her as a daughter. Before we get to the finale where the shit hits the fan.
You talk about PTSD from the David scene?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even take it that way.
Really?
Yeah, really. I was wondering, like, when she had all those scenes in the last episode as they were walking to like when she was not listening to him at all, and like, was in her like daydreaming, agreeing to whatever. I guess that explanation could make sense too. I was thinking it purely of like she knows this is the end of the road because he's going to get her to where he's been trying to take her this whole time. And
well, I guess that's possible too.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a bit of both.
You're just playing middle person here.
I mean,
Uh,
I could see it either way. I mean, when I was watching it, I took it as, she's still
Mm,
traumatized, but I guess we also don't really know how much time has passed between the two episodes, so I feel like that would be a
mm,
factor too.
yeah, yeah, they don't really explain that. Um, so a couple of thoughts on this that I had were like, uh, for one, Pedro Pascal's Joel is much more vulnerable than Joel from the game. So in the game, he's very much just like kind of action hero, like big man doing it all. And we don't get, I mean, I don't remember anything really at all where, he's definitely is still traumatized, from his daughter dying, and is still depressed and everything from that. But we don't get anything in the game where he, like, there's a scene where he opens up to Tommy in the show about feeling like he's not good enough to do this anymore. He's getting old. He can't do this. And we don't get that in the game. And that was one thing that I thought was a great addition to the show. It really opened that character up a lot, and let's get you some insight into the mind and just the way he's been acting. It absolutely, is similar in the game where he's like very closed off for much of their journey. And so like one thing you get in the game is you get a lot of more like little interactions and quips, like as you're going through and doing things, like they're having like little conversations and stuff, and you don't, because we skip a lot of that. Like, you don't get the action stuff in the show. That's stuff that you just kind of naturally miss. And I absolutely, like you're saying, Joe, I think one more episode, like a whole episode's worth of content just between the two of them, like at varying points along the way, uh, would have gone a long ways for me. By the end, I still felt the bond was there, but up until like episode like 7-ish, basically. So like, yeah, that episode where where Joel, essentially tries to leave her behind and have Tommy take her, and then he changes his mind. Is like, okay, I'm gonna go. I'll take you. After, like, from that point on, I felt like they really connected a lot, and then like up to that point, there wasn't enough there for me to say, yeah, okay, there's something here. But um, I absolutely felt by the end. Long story short, um, I yeah, I think their performances were both great in those last few episodes on conveying that. And yeah, it really felt, there was a connection there between them. Um, do we want to? We've been talking a bit about just like character evolution. I just talked a bit about the evolution of Joel through this thing, and one of the interesting kind of like mirrorings of sort is that basically you get, at the start, Joel is very closed off, and then you get to a point where Joel's like, he accepts that, he's got to move on from the past, and that Ellie is this new person that I can call my daughter, and then he's open from that point on.
yeah.
And what's really interesting is that, Ellie is very open all the way through, and then at that point she closes off. They basically trade sides. um and it definitely is not that profound in the game. I thought that was a great addition to the show here.
So they don't actually outright say it, but like we're to assume that she killed her friend, right? Is that
Right.
I think she fairly heavily implies it in the last
yeah?
episode.
Right. Yeah, I think it comes up in the last episode. But
Okay.
yeah, they don't. That was one thing in the moment I was like, you're just going to end the episode here? You're not going to tell the rest of that, the ending of that story?
Yeah.
And that was actually, yeah, because that was like the end of episode 7. And because I knew from the story, like, episode 8 had to be David, and then episode 9 had to be the hospital. And I was like, there's too much story. How are you going to fit this in? And yeah, I think I mean, it played off pretty well, I think. But
Yeah.
I was caught off guard, like they didn't finish off the end of that story. Uh, okay, let me just look here at my notes quick. So, um, oh, one thing I wanted. So, really cool thing is they had some cameos in the show that were pretty cool. And one of those, I thought the biggest one that was like really got me pretty good was the fact that they brought in Ashley Johnson, who is the voice of Ellie in the game, and they made her Ellie's mom in the show. And once I realized that's what was happening, I was like, this is like truly like poetic storytelling here.
She gave birth to the character.
Yeah, she gave birth to herself, more or less. That was really cool. I thought she did a great job. What was funny was that, you know, when she didn't bother to mask her voice at all in you know, when she was in the show, and I was just like, that is exactly how Ellie sounds in the game. And so that was a pretty cool moment. Couple other here that you may or may not be aware of, but Troy Baker, who is the voice of Joel in the game, was David's right hand man.
Leave it to Cleaver.
Yeah.
Oh.
And another one here was Laura Bailey, who voices oh gosh, it went right out of my head. I cannot think of her name. But in the game, the second game, she is like the main antagonist.
Is it Abby?
Abby, there it is. Thank you. Yes. So she voices Abby in the second game. She was one of the nurses in the operating room in that final episode. So it was a pretty cool bringing the
also interestingly, not even a cameo, but the actress who plays Marlene in both the game and the show.
Oh, does she? I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah, Merle Dandridge.
Okay. Yeah, that was one thing I had not heard. Cool. So it's like real quick because I want to like save the ending of the show for like our ending discussion here. So one more thing I want to talk about here was just like just some of the really cool attention to detail, like callbacks to the game, like the clothing that they're wearing through a lot of the show is like right out of the game. Like they went and had clothing made to match the wardrobes from the game. Bill's truck is like the exact same truck, like right down to the T. I
just wanted to say I liked how they did the clothing, especially like with Ellie, because it's obviously like, you know, there's a scene where she puts out like an outfit that's from the game, but it's not. I feel like in like a different adaptation, there would have been like a music cue there or something, or like something to make it obvious, like, hey, we're doing the thing. And I like how they just like everything in the show was just super subtle and just worked.
Yeah. Yeah, things like the quote endure and survive, that's right out of the game. The scene at the final scene in the Bill and Frank episode where they have a shot of going out the open window of the bedroom was really amazing, because that's how the game opens up. Like the start menu of the game is basically that exact view. So that was a cool callback. And then in the last episode, where Joel is like helping Ellie up to get the ladder down off that second floor, you do that in the game like 24 times.
Yeah, I was gonna say when Cody asked if that sniper scene was from the game, like the ladder thing to me was the most video game moment of this entire series.
Yeah, it was so cool. I love that they stuck that in there. I mean, obviously they knew that, you know, fans are gonna be like, oh, that's a thing. I could have seen some more bricks and bottles in these.
Yeah.
That would have been, but
fair.
they didn't really fight the infected. That's when you see those in the game, is the bricks and bottles. But
gotta distract that clicker.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there was a lot of really cool attention to detail things in the show that really paid off for fans, I thought. So I guess that brings us to what I want to talk about here, and that is the lie. And so to go over that real quick here, so we get Joel saves Ellie from the operating room, carries her out of there, takes out Marlene, which was really cool. I mean, the way they did that in the show and actually in the game, from what I remember, the game was actually very similar as well. So you get just the way it's cut together is, you see that, like Marlene confronts Joel, and then you get a scene of him driving away, but you don't see Ellie, and so you don't know in that moment, did he leave her there? Did he take her? What's going on here? And I felt that played off really well. But yeah, what I want to ask you guys is about the lie, because this is definitely like it's the biggest controversy kind of thing from the game, and the thing that kind of like was a dividing line. And really what it's a lot of this is all about is Joel a good guy? Is he a bad guy?
I mean, is that the lie or is that the choice he makes?
Well, it's both.
Not that they're not tied together, but
yeah, they're definitely tied together. But yeah, in that moment, I'd be really interested, I guess, if Cody, if you want to start with that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, like the whole from the operating room scene through to the end of that episode.
So, you're asking me because I don't know what happens in the video games.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Putting me on the spot. No, I mean, from my perspective, it seemed like he was, and he made very clear in the last episode as well, when they were like saying that they'd have to essentially like go in and remove parts of her brain and essentially kill her to get the cure, is what it sounded like. So he seemed like his bond with her was such that even if it was maybe enough to help humanity, he was not going to let somebody do that to his second chance at a daughter, if you will. So it kind of made sense to me. I guess your lie he's talking about here is basically when she wakes up, he tells her, what went down, his own scenario that he makes up about the hospital, and said that they couldn't make a cure, which within the context of the series we are presented, and me not knowing anything about the video game, like, we are not given any indication that a cure could be made from this regardless. Like, the only thing I have to go on is the fact that she tries a very rudimentary blood transfusion in one episode, which did not seem fruitful, but for all they know, it was not going to work. And, they were kind of guessing that was the case, but I guess not. And then basically the summary I'm looking at here basically is just, she asks him if that's a true statement, and he says yes, doubles down on it. It worked for me just from the like parental standpoint, I would say, like, of just like, yeah, we could save humanity, but I'm not gonna give up my kid to do that. So find somebody else's kid maybe, and see if there's somebody else out there that, which also is a non-video gamer. I don't know if this is explored more in that or not, but essentially seem to go back to the birth scene, which is towards the end of the show here as well. Now, her mom said that she was bitten after she had severed the umbilical cord, which I'm guessing is not true. Is that where the powers are coming?
She's a liar.
She's a liar, and therefore this is why she has the immunity, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would follow that then that's a pretty specific circumstance, I guess, but would follow that there could feasibly be other people out there then that could have the same thing. But thinking about the math in my head now, it would be extremely small number.
Yeah.
Now that I think about that, and when I watched it, I was like, okay, so this could have happened to other people. But I don't know. I kind of liked it, but where I guess I'm curious as the non-video gamer is if they go to a season 2 of this, from my perspective, and not knowing what the second video game is about, I kind of essentially figured this is how the series was going to end, which was they're still more or less on the run, the two of them. They're going to go someplace and humanity is not saved. Spoiler. But what the second series is going to be about, second season, I would just be curious about, because that does seem very similar to a lot of other apocalyptic zombie style shows where it's like, and nothing was solved, and now we got to go to this new scenario where we haven't fixed the problem, and now there's going to be new people with their own wants and dangers and things of that nature. So I guess what I'm getting at here is I don't know that it cheapens heading into season 2 by them kind of following the pattern that other shows have done. There were touch and go moments in this, again, not knowing the show, where like, I didn't know, maybe she dies in the video game, maybe he dies in the video game at that one point, I didn't know. So everybody coming through all this, it seemed to be predictable is the wrong word, but like it ended how I thought this series was going to end, I would say. But I bought into what happened at the end here in this one.
Yeah, just real quick, to my memory, the last episode is, I don't think they changed anything at all from the game. I think it's pretty much one for one.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was really nervous going into this episode because I knew how the game ended. And like, first of all, I was curious to see if they were going to do things, the exact same way, or at least like, pretty close to the game. 2, even before I found out the running time for the final episode, it felt like it was like coming up too quickly and that there wasn't enough time to like do everything they needed to do.
Same. Then
I found out the episode is only like 45 minutes long. And like, I honestly expected it to be over an hour. Like I thought it was going to be, I would have expected like an hour and a half, like super long episode to like cover all this ground. So then I was really nervous. And like, after I saw the running time, I was like, well, crap, they're going to give us some kind of like cliffhanger and not, even cover all the ground of the finale of the game. Like they're going to, have them tell Joel that they need to kill Ellie and just end there and like not show what he does or something like that.
Right.
So I was amazed that they actually managed to cram everything in there, and that for the most part, it didn't really feel like it was crammed. And like, it's even more kind of miraculous when you consider the fact that the episode opens with the scene of Ellie's birth, and like, that feels like it takes up a fairly substantial amount of time.
Yeah.
Like,
I didn't mention that, but that is all new material.
Yeah, but I mean, it covers a lot of ground before we even get to this like climactic sequence, and it really, I didn't think it felt rushed at all. I mean, as far as the morality of like Joel's choice and then the lie, it's complicated, but it's designed to be that way. I mean, what really struck me watching this even more so than when I played the game is the fact that Ellie is not given any agency. I mean, obviously Joel does what he thinks he has to do, but Marlene specifically says that she didn't tell Ellie that she was going to die. She says like, I didn't tell Ellie, like, so she wasn't scared at all. So like neither of them are actually giving Ellie a choice. I mean, earlier in this episode, like, I mean, there is the moment where Ellie tells Joel that she has to see things through. And I feel like if we have to kind of infer or guess what her decision would have been, I feel like she probably would have sacrificed herself. But I mean, we still don't know that for sure. And also, even though she's been through all this shit, she is a child, and not that she's not like intelligent and worldly, but she might not really fully grasp like, the full extent of what's going on if she was given that choice. So it's just, I mean, these are all things that we kind of have to consider as an audience. I mean, I don't have any children myself, but I feel like if I was in Joel's position, I would absolutely do the same thing. Especially because, as Cody said, there is no certainty.
Yeah, it's definitely not guaranteed.
Like, it's the operating room looks pretty shoddy. Like, we're still kind of in a post-apocalypse and everything's run down. And I wouldn't have a lot of faith in the current state of science at this time. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like for that perspective, I really cannot say Joel did the wrong thing. And then as far as the lying to Ellie about what happened, I mean, it's an impossible situation because I mean, he really can't win there. You know, if he tells her the truth, she's going to hate him for the rest of her life. And if he lies to her, there's a decent chance she finds out the truth and still hates, you know. And I mean, that's a question I have that I kind of want to throw back at you guys is do you feel like she believes him at the end of this episode when she like basically makes him promise that what he had told her was true? Like, how did you feel about that, Cody?
Well, I was just thinking actually of our prior conversation, which was how we both viewed that episode 9 intro with her being silent at all those moments differently.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that also would maybe see how you evaluate this final moment of the series. Because if you took it as PTSD, then maybe you might take it as like she's like, this needs to end and I need to find the way to cure humanity and maybe I sacrifice myself. Versus like maybe if she's kind of wrestling with some other demons here that she's trying to think about, then maybe she's like, I want to have life at this point forward. Maybe she would have chose to not have died in that moment. So it's interesting, like that moment of silence that recurs in that episode might actually influence how you view the ending on this, which I didn't think of that either watching it, but because I was thinking she probably would not have sacrificed herself, but I'm wondering now if that's because I took that earlier moment to be that way when I was watching it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, well, with that exchange where she says she has to, you know, see it through. Like again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I felt like there was this subtext of, you know, because Joel basically says, well, he does say like, you don't have to do this. We could just go back to Tommy's. Like, you know, you absolutely don't have to do this. Kind of like,
true.
let's just walk away right now. And she's like adamant, like, you know, I came this far, I sacrificed so much, I have to see this through to the end. But like to me, kind of, I feel like there is an undercurrent to what Joel is saying of, you know, this is a dangerous situation, or like this could potentially be a dangerous situation. Why don't we just get the fuck out of here?
Yeah, that's right. Because he had said like, basically no interaction we've had so far has went very well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was the final bit of this final episode was when I was most impressed with Belle Ramsey's performance. I think what's amazing is that the way she performs that final bit, you know, where she asks him to swear to tell the truth, and then she hangs and thinks about what he said, and then just says, "Okay."
Yeah,
Could be taken, like
it's so subtle
ways. So she could accept the lie. She could say, "Okay, yeah, he told me the truth. I believe him." She could know, because we know that she's very perceptive of other people. She could know that he's lying, and that it actually means something to her, like that she is disappointed in him, loses trust in him. She could accept the lie and just be like, "Okay, I'm cool with it." Like any of those things could be true.
Yeah,
in the way
that's true.
That was acted. And I was, you know, the way they stuck that landing was, I really, really enjoyed that bit. And what's cool is that we all have, there's a really cool dynamic here because we all have different perspectives where Cody does not know the source material. Joe, you know the first game and not the second game for the most part.
Yeah.
And then I've played through both. And so the knowledge of the weight that final scene has on everything, it's kind of good because we definitely are all taking different points of view at it, which is pretty cool to see. One thing I had in my mind also that just cut back a bit was the decisions that Joel makes in this episode. You know, as I said, it's basically straight out of the game. And in development of the game, I'd heard this, that they basically were, you know, getting
getting their opinions of people who were playtesting the game, and they're like, you know, basically, do you agree with what happened here? And it was like 50-50 split for people who were like not parents. They're like 50% of them were like, I agree with Joel. That's what he should have done. Like 50% were like, what? He can't do this. This is terrible. He's like killed a brain surgeon that could have saved humanity. What is he doing? And then like 100% of the parents who were polled in this were like, that is exactly what he should have done.
Huh.
Which is a really cool.
Which of my kids am I talking about in this scenario? Just might change my number on this.
But yeah, so I mean that final scene where where he swears that there wasn't a cure and that they just got out of there, and that essentially making her life mean, it could have meant everything and now it possibly means nothing. Really amazing done. It was, certainly was the biggest part of the game, I think, like that huge moral conundrum. I think is probably the thing that put the game like over the top in most people's minds. And I hope it does the same thing with the show too, because it was really well done. So I think that brings us to our end here, unless you guys have other thoughts or notes or things that you've had rattling around. All right. Well, where did I have that? I did pull that up. What was the ratings of the show? I know it was really high. Here we go. Okay, so Rotten Tomatoes, their average rating is a 96% with audience score of 89%. That feels about right for me. I probably would say, I guess if we're gonna do a rating on this, we haven't talked about this, but I assume we'll go out here and give a final rating on this season. I'll go ahead and go first. As I said, it's kind of hard for me to separate myself from my love of the game and my knowledge of the game to look at this objectively and say how I felt it was as a show necessarily, because I was really impressed with the way they stuck to the source material. And, as I said at the beginning, was this is absolutely the way to do adaptations, is like leave 90% of the story the way it is, leave elements of the story the way they're supposed to be, and make creative changes and additions where necessary and where you think you can improve on things. But this was so close to the original story, and I felt pulled it off the same way. I was very happy watching this. I thought it was one of the better things I've seen in a long time. This for me is a 9 out of 10. We'll settle on 9.0.
0.2.
You want to go next, Cody?
Yeah, I'll go next. I'm just gonna start with the shout out to my favorite character in the whole series, which we didn't even mention, and that is the character played by Elaine Miles, the character of Florence, who is the wife who's being held hostage in the cottage by Joel when her husband comes home.
Both of those actors and characters were amazing. I would watch a spin-off about those two.
Those Firefly people?
Yeah. Did you tell them the truth? Oh, yeah.
Why not? You made them soup?
That was great.
Oh, boy. Now, this was really fun. I don't know anything about the video game other than it was like I said, kind of a zombie style type thing, which there's, a few of those. But I know it's a game that's loved by a lot of people. So I was intrigued by the series. It's not one I thought I was ever going to watch. So just the fact that I got through the 9 episodes in 4 days, I don't even know if I can name another show that I have binged watched that many episodes of in 4 days. I don't even know how long, maybe even since there's been the ability to binge TV shows. I just don't binge TV shows ever. So it was fun to like force myself to fit it in the 4 days, but it was actually fun because I just watched 3 Thursday, 3 Friday, and 3 today. So worked out really well. I enjoyed it quite a bit. If I have a couple little tiny things, I guess I would say I wished honestly I had seen just a smidge more of the zombies, just because I felt like they were presented as this big threat, especially early on. They were like, because I thought that was so cool that like the roots could connect underground so far, and like they could, basically send zombies to where the trouble area was, even if the zombies themselves couldn't pick up on the signals, which is different than a lot of the other zombie properties out there. So I expected a lot more out of them. We didn't get that really, especially talking about towards the end. There just weren't a lot of zombies. So I would like to have seen that cranked up, not a ton, but maybe like 20% more, just 30% more, just a little bit more to remind that that's out there would have been good. And then also conversely, like, I don't know if it's because I watched them in such a short span or not, but there were times when not so much the Bill and Frank story, but there were times when they would introduce characters kind of out of nowhere, which, that's not so unlike The Walking Dead, where somebody new pops up and then you kind of see their backstory. But it was like, for the most part, they would introduce somebody and then like they were gone within like half of that episode or the end of the episode, and then their character was dead. And like, I was like, why should I have cared about that person? Because he would, I didn't even get to know who that character was, and now they're gone and they were presented as a threat for like half an episode or an episode. So the human stories, maybe, I don't know if I needed more background on them, or maybe if I needed to like not, in my mind, think they were such an important part of the plot. Like when David came up, I was like, oh, this is gonna be like the big bad for like multiple episode arc here, and like he was gone in like episode and a half, 2 episodes tops, and I was like, oh, maybe not. Like there was that whole community and there was this whole thing built up about people starving, and like none of that matters because they left that encampment as almost as soon as they got there. So I don't know. It's like they presented details in areas that I don't know that I needed the details of, because it made me as the viewer think it was going to lead someplace that it didn't ultimately lead to. So, but a lot of high moments in this. I really liked the camaraderie between the two leads. I liked, like I said here, the Bill and Frank episode was just so good to get through that. And really just, there were elements of comedy in this. There was the stupid puns like that kept coming up over and over, which themselves were not more than groan worthy, but like in their relationship, it was fun to watch how even using the puns, like, ramped up and evolved as it went on, to where like, he's like, please stop saying those, to later on, he's like, that was a 3 out of 10. And then they'd argue about what it was. So I really enjoyed this. I'm happy I was able to participate on this one with you guys, and I'll give this an 8.5. This was pretty solid.
Wow.
Good to hear.
I mean, I basically agree with everything Brett said. Some of what Cody said. I mean, I think this was, to me, very close to being a perfect season of television. And I watch a lot of television, and it is rare that that's the case. It's also really rare. I mean, I mentioned earlier that if anything, I felt like I wanted one more episode. That is rare to me in this streaming era, because I feel like most streaming series suffer from having too many episodes, especially like the Disney Plus series. I feel like mostly suffer from that. And a lot of like Netflix series where they always try to get 10 episodes out of a season, and they probably should have been like 6 or 7 episodes. So, I mean, the fact that this, my only minor criticism here is that I wanted maybe one more episode, I feel like is really not even that bad of a thing. This has to be the best video game adaptation ever created. I mean, not that that's a high bar to clear, but it's still, something commendable. And, going back to what I said my wife had said when we saw the trailer for this, and she's like, I get it, it's another zombie show, like kind of dismissively, but she ended up watching this with me, and she got pulled into it and really enjoyed it. And I mean, it really is not another zombie show. I know that was kind of one of Cody's criticisms, is that he wished there had been more zombies in it, but I like the fact that that just was not kind of the priority of the creators behind this, that they really did focus on the human elements and human relationships. And I mean, I just think in a lot of ways, this series just carries so much emotional weight. And I mean, episode 3 is, obviously a highlight for that. I still think about that episode, but I feel like I'm going to be thinking about the finale for a long time to come and kind of, going over some of the moral choices there. And I mean, all that being said, I actually am going to give it the same rating as Brett. To me, this is a 9 out of 10 season of television. And yeah, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I felt the same thing. Like I needed a little more content, I think, to give it like a higher rating.
Yeah.
I think there was more there that could have been told. I was very happy that they, kind of gave us more like outside stuff, like especially the Bill and Frank stuff. And I think because that's why I think really made it a lot of it great. It just could have been more than 9 episodes, I think, is the thing. And just another kind of like distinction too is like I probably as much as I enjoyed it, I probably like a 9.75 for like enjoyment. And the how well the adaptation was done. But I'm trying to like temper that number down. It's like even though I really enjoyed it, I don't know that it was like I definitely could find things about it that I would have improved, for a general audience.
Yeah, so I agree.
We also have only mere weeks until we have a better video game adaptation, but that's neither here nor there. It's a me, Italian accent Chris Pratt.
Ooh.
I'm trying to decide if we're
don't taboo me.
Like I might, because we haven't been to a theater since COVID.
Okay.
And I might try and convince the family to go to that one. But
do it.
As I've mentioned before, my son has told me I don't like Mario.
Oh, that's right.
So maybe that won't happen.
Maybe he will like Chris Pratt as Mario.
Yeah,
maybe. There you go.
It's a me.
I'm the problem.
Right, I mean,
well,
I'm excited about Jack Black as Bowser, but that's the only thing I'm excited about for that movie.
Okay. Well, for this episode, I think we are all wrapped up here. Sorry, you guys got anything else you want to send us off with? But yeah, it was good. I enjoyed that a lot. I guess let's head out of here in I don't know the style of our
somber
outro.
fashion.
Yeah, some post-apocalyptic zombie something. I don't know.
Nice.
So thank you for listening to this. We have been Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing. Check us out on our past episodes if you wish to, if you enjoy this, and share us with your friends if you enjoy this as well. So let's get our word out there.
Do it.
Friends occasionally.
Zombie boogie ragtime, it's happy times.
Not disagree. Also, we didn't talk about Henry and Sam, but that was really sad too. Bye.
Shoot a friend. Make some soup. Having a good time. Do. Ragtime boogie.
What is happening?
Exposure, northern exposure. She's from northern exposure. Anyway, Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.